Okay, so welcome also on our behalf, and uh, we are here to discuss the Aalto design system as a case study. So we've been working on it for a while, and now we can share some insights and learnings from along the way. So as said, we are Tuomas and Joona. So I am Tuomas, and
I am apparently Joona.
yes, and yeah, well, our roles are maybe a bit mixed, but in this project, I guess we can be called. I'm the development and he's the design.
Yes.
Or I'm the system and he's the design. Yeah. Well, anyways, we work at this company called Taiste, as you know. So now we are here on our as our guests, and I will keep this very short, but the obligatory company presentation part. So Taiste is a company with about 60 people now, a bit less, and we make digital services of all kinds. And the company has been existing since 2009. I've been along for maybe 3 years now, and we have offices in Turku, Helsinki, and Jyväskylä, also a small hub. And well, basically what we do, we design and develop digital services. That's it in a nutshell. Then yeah.
And yeah. So we're about 150 projects deep at the moment, and we do all kinds of things from like very technical sort of professional tools to then like consumer applications, mobile applications and such. So it's sort of all around the map. And big companies and startups also.
Yeah, but anyways, like, yes. Yeah, sorry, I forgot. So if there is anybody here who does not want to be included in any kind of photos, then tell it to Ilona, who is there, because she's taking some photos, I don't know what purpose, for our social media or something like this. Yeah, good that you reminded me, thanks. Yeah, well, anyways, but now we were supposed to talk about this particular project called Aalto University Design System, and well, we're kind of happy with it at the moment because we've been winning a couple of awards and it's starting to be in a good shape for presenting, even though never ready. Yeah, so first, a couple of words about the project itself. Well, okay, I assume that most people here are somewhat familiar with what design systems are in general, but just to kind of summarize it, in our opinion, we think of a design system as a set of pre-designed and pre-developed building blocks that can be used to make different kinds of digital end products. And the important point is that it's not enough to have the building blocks, but you also need to have the instructions. So if you think of it like a set of Lego bricks, then you also need to have the manual which tells you how to put them together. And especially in this case, this has become quite evident as we have a very wide variety of different kinds of users. So in general, why do you want to have a design system? The benefits can be maybe summarized in this sentence. So basically the idea is to create consistent user experiences and ensuring that every digital product built on this system is on brand and is accessible and usable for all kinds of users. And obviously when you reuse the same components, then you gain some benefits of decreasing costs and increasing production speed. And yeah, this small video will tell you a bit about this.
Aalto is a university, but above all else, we're a community. We're a community of doers, working on solving grand societal challenges.
Sorry about the sound, it only comes from there.
And a lot of achievements that we want to show off. Our community wants to build exciting digital touchpoints, but they've been lacking the tools to be able to do so. We, of course, want to make sure that those touchpoints are the highest quality and that they look and feel inherently like Aalto. So it's up to us to deliver on the toolbox to make sure that that happens.
I'm Anna Savisaari, the Design System Product Owner at Aalto University. We have hundreds, if not thousands, of creators with their needs, ideas and messages from different fields of expertise. So there is not one size that fits all. In our academic environment, freedom is very important, and our system allows that while keeping the core and the customer experience unified. So all our various research groups, projects, labs and services, they don't need to redesign the button. We've done it for them and it's in the system. So they can now focus on what's important, their interesting content. New students and researchers come in every year, and the amount of different touch points that they use is enormous. Imagine the digital strain a person has to live with if they have to adjust to different user experiences every time they use a different service. And that strain is what we want to avoid.
So the core principles driving the Aalto design system are modularity and adaptability. Different contexts and environments, the design system may be integrated at various levels. The users can choose to use complete modules or templates, or opt in only for individual elements like design tokens or single UI components, and this way craft their own user interfaces. And this approach allows for creative freedom while ensuring that Aalto's visual identity and accessibility standards and user friendliness are upheld.
All right, a little bit about the sort of starting point of the project. So, as we can see here, it's a multi-vendor environment with Siili, Taiste, Aalto and Hasan and partners. And basically when we started, we had no previous experience on what is it to do like a thing on a university setting. It is fairly different from even from a big company, because as Anna said in the video, there's a lot of different stakeholders at play here. You have lecturers, you have students, you have faculty, visiting faculty, you have startups, and you also have people who sort of donate or participate in Aalto in other ways. And this means that when each of them sort of wants to make something, they're gonna make them with their own rules and sort of own ways that they like to do things. This way we get a lot of legacy things, we get a lot of different technologies, and we get a lot of opinions. So we build design systems for companies before, and if we look about like a typical company, let's say this is a food delivery service. So you have a client app, you have the career app, you have the restaurant app. You have a few different user groups that all sort of, or different apps that serve different user groups. Now in a university setting, we have, when we started, we had like north of 450 websites, and now it's up to like 1,000 plus. There's hundreds of possible users for the design system, and they come from like tens of different disciplines. So they might do the same thing but want to do it very differently.
Yeah, and also the roles and skill sets are very different. There might be some, for example, students who might not be too advanced with something, or there might be people who are using the design system totally not as their main job, but as a kind of side hustle, which is like only one fraction of their time, and their actual expertise lies somewhere else. So you need to take into account very different kinds of people.
And when we sort of came to Aalto, this is sort of what a bit of what it is. So it's things that look very different from each other. So there's a huge amount of diversity of creating digital touch points and sort of services. And at first we thought that this is something that we sort of need to compress and make one identity and sort of rule the university in a digital landscape. But as we progressed, we understood that this is actually not what we want to do, but we actually want to give these people the freedom to, so we give them building blocks and then they decide sort of how deep they want to go into customizing what they get. And so we come to the conclusion that there are users and there are misusers. And we need to serve both groups. So there are users that don't want to design anything. They have their content that they need to present in an Aalto-like clear and accessible way. They just want to publish the thing that they've used their time to create. And then we have misusers who want to break the rules and sort of need different ways of like support on creating the chaos that they want to create.
Yeah, so in this sense it's a very different case from most like company design systems, where typically the idea is that with the aid of the design system every possibility of being chaotic is taken away from the users, but here it's quite the contrary. Okay, so then we talk about like how is this design system then structured. So we have kind of different layers of approaching the design system for these different user groups, and it's kind of this presentation we're gonna give you a couple of like example scenarios how certain types of users might be using it and how that relates to different elements of the existing design system.
And if we compare these to what a design system normally is, we have like 3 more layers basically than what a normal system might have, because we have users who don't use the system as like they're not like devs or they're not designers. They actually need something that's a lot more high level that they can create the touch points.
Yeah, so begin with the channels, or this is a concept we use for describing any kind of like a website or app or whatever like end product that is created using the elements of the design system. So imagine, for example, there is a new student, and the problem obviously is that if every touch point to the university is different, then it becomes quickly a cognitive overload, and it's not very nice environment to navigate in when there is a lot of new information to take in. So then on this level, obviously this kind of a user does not really do anything with the design system but just enjoys the end results. So if the different services of the university are somehow similar to each other, and it's making the life of this new student easier. And they can be using any kind of devices or in different kind of environments and skill sets, but still they somehow experience the same unified university brand. So the system helps by making the different services being coherent and similar. Then moving forward, though somebody who is actually creating something with the design system.
Yes, so we're in templates, and our lab rat is a member of a research group, and they need a website to present their subject and get funding for it. So for this type of user, we've created sort of most used pages as ready-made templates that you only just fill in your content, and it should work without modification on most purposes. And the help here, of course, is that they're readily available, and it frees up time, so you don't actually need to do the designing, but you input your content.
Okay, and then next up we have this thing called sections. So that's a word we use to refer to a block of UI elements that are stacked. Like, for example, on a website you might have like a multitude of sections on top of each other, each one filling like the full width of the page. So example here would be that there's some member of the university staff who has some more or like slightly less typical problem, and they need to create a page that is not possible with this ready-made template. So it's not one of those like most common predefined ways. So in this case, they could take a template, for example, and then start modifying it. So as you can see, the template consists of these horizontal blocks, which are the sections. So basically what you can do is you take new sections and drop them in and organize them in a different way, and then this way get again like a full page which is out of the box responsive and accessible and so forth. And you can also create some sections out of the modules yourself if you don't like the existing ones. But
this is the first level of anarchy.
No, yeah, but kind of not so heavy anarchy, but just a very small level of anarchy. But yeah, you can kind of adapt it to your own needs. And then also part of these sections is that they contain the system for example, for going dark mode or changing the colors of the individual pieces based on the university branding. So you can make this kind of small modifications to support your own content, but still no need to do some like design in the traditional sense. So the pre-designed sections help making quite many kinds of user experiences, but still avoiding the need to design anything yourself.
Next up, we have modules and components. Components are the sort of maybe the most used thing in design systems, and we've named bigger components modules to get a clearer structure and maybe like slightly nudge it into do two different types of anarchy that you can do. So our subject here is a external vendor, so let's say a consultant who needs to do a design that requires elements that don't exist yet in the system. Now we start with the template, and we're gonna separate a section from there. There's a card collection section, and we're gonna take one of those cards, which is a module, and then sort of take the little things that are components inside there. We're gonna remove something because we're gonna need it to look a bit different. There's a bit of a different experience that we're gonna make. Then we're gonna change the aspect ratio, add some interactions that we need for this purpose, and now we have a new card, and we can then create a section from these cards and then just install it in our template.
Yeah, and still these custom-made modules can work alongside with the existing sections without breaking the basic layout.
And how the system looks here? Well, the existing components can be utilized to make new modules and sections so that we can easily create bespoke experiences without having to actually make anything from scratch.
Okay, and then moving on to even smaller elements, then we have the tokens or design tokens. So those you can think of as reusable design decisions, and they are like the smallest elements of the design that somehow make it an Aalto design. So for example, colors or typography or dimensions and this kind of stuff. So, well, let's say that some ambitious brand manager thinks that they would like to make an Aalto page, but they want to make it look quite different than the standard style. So they would then start making something more radical. So basically, say someone has this concept that we want to control the music in all the lounges of Otaniemi campus, and there is some user interface sketch for it. Then the designer decides that, okay, this audio control interface with the sliders taken from the design system is not nice, but they want to make rather a circular knob that you can rotate. So basically here they are making a completely new component, but still they don't need to start from scratch, but they can rely on these design tokens that the system provides. So for example, you don't make it some random size, but you use the dimension variable. And well, for all kinds of things there. And then you can use the colors that are semantically named, so you don't take random hex values, but you use the color tokens to make it look as it should. And then you have obviously some typography elements, so you can still follow the same style. And once you've done it, you can make it into a module which contains now 3 of these components, and use the tokens once again to make it behave, or the layout behave the same way as the other kinds of other components. And yeah, once this is done, you can then use it in combination with the other modules and sections that you took out of the existing library. And also can go further, and let's say this radical brand creator now wants to replace the action color with something else. So they don't like this dark gray, but they want instead to make everything green. So you can do it by overriding the design tokens. So this way it affects not only the custom-made component, but also for example, the button there at the bottom, which is house provided.
And the tokens are in 3 different tiers, so we don't change the actual action token itself, but the value that it inherits from the bottom tier.
Yeah, but let's not go there yet. Okay, but then similar way, you could then decide that, okay, this Aalto font is boring, and let's put some more dynamic font there, and yeah, then this way you created this view that is now, well, maybe somehow resembling the Aalto brand, but already quite different. But the key takeaway here is that you can basically like keep changing even the smallest details of stuff, but still somehow rely on the system. So for example, here you could still keep the imagine that this view would be now shown on a bigger viewport, and then it would stretch and, you know, be somehow benefiting from the design system. So the design tokens is like the last line of defense. If you want to get crazy, you can do it, but still, if you use this token system, then you can at least stay systematically crazy and make the same kind of changes for all the different components. And well, in many cases, the real-world users are not wanting to make totally different kind of stuff, but for example, to change the colors or do this kind of modifications. So in this sense, they are still pretty much within the borders of the design system, but still making some kind of illegal choices. Okay, so those were a couple of examples of how the different levels of misusing work, and briefly how this whole what is inside the design system. So I don't know. This is pretty much similar to any design system, I think, but anyways, go through these a little bit. So first of all, we have the design system website. So this is like the main starting point for somebody who would like to use the design system. So there is a public website. You can actually go there if you want to. It's brand.aalto.fi/ds for design system. But there you can find the listing and description of all the elements that are included in the system. There is the instructions for designers and developers. There's the listing of all the design tokens, and then all those components, modules, and sections that exist in the library. And then for the designers, there is maybe you can tell.
There's a starter kit. So this is not a minimal version of the design system, but this is a design file that you attach the library to, and it includes said templates that are pre-made, so you can basically utilize those and throw your own sections in there. Or then you can start from scratch and start assembling your own things from the library. Then we have the master library. This is basically the thing that a normal system user should in Figma never use. This is just a thing where everything is created, and then the component instances are picked from here for the design files.
Yeah, so there is this kind of division that there is the design system team itself who kind of maintains the design system and, for example, makes new components, and then obviously the bigger group of people who are like using these components but cannot directly go there and change anything in the design system itself, even though of course they can suggest things and there is some kind of communication going back and forth. But for practical reasons, obviously not everybody in the university can go and change the button to be different, because then it would break everybody else's work.
Then we have additional assets for designers, which are basically files, so font files, and
Icons and stuff.
icons. That's kind of it.
Yeah, then for the development there is also a set of resources. So there are some assets that you can download, and then some software libraries for development. So, well, the essentials, like you can get the fonts and icons and design tokens in multiple formats to be included in your project if you want to go bare bones. So, but most often you would rather go to some library, like for example we have this, or for example at the moment we only have this React library, so there is a React implementation of all those components that exist in the design files. So you can take this React package, the npm package, and include it in your project, then just use the components with this quite simple interface. Then we have a storybook. I don't know if this is familiar to everybody, but it's like a place for showcasing and developing the components. So that's also like a separate website where you can go and take a look at what kind of components there are and test some different data. For example, like put some longer text there on this simple component and see how it stretches and so forth. Then, similar to the designer starter kit, we have this React developer starter kits for a couple of different frameworks. So if you are starting a new project, the easiest way would be then to just clone this repository and start hacking away. And also, besides the React implementation, we now have at the moment this plain HTML, like a static version of all the components. Because the idea is that over time there will be more implementations of the same component library in different front-end libraries. So, for example, if somebody would now want to make a Angular version of it, or actually what is happening at the moment is that some people want to make a Drupal library. So then this plain HTML is supposed to be like helping in those work. You can't directly use it because there is no JavaScript, it's not functional, but if you follow the same structure for the HTML, then you can use the CSS straight out of the box. And yeah, well, the kind of philosophy that is behind this is now that all the assets are trying to be as atomic as possible, so maximizing the possibility of including them in different kinds of projects or on different kind of technology stacks. For example, the design tokens, the colors and fonts and or typography and this kind of stuff, they are mostly used in a CSS file. But then, for example, if somebody would be developing a native app, they might not be using CSS at all. So that's why they can also get it as a JSON, which is more generic for most environments. And at some point we were also using Tailwind, and that was dropped for some political reasons. But anyways, then you could imagine that there are like different manifestations of the same assets to be used. And we have made some like automatic converters. So when you're maintaining the system, you can, for example, just update the tokens into JSON, and then the CSS generated automatically based on that, which is actually quite important when you start having more than 2 different technologies supported at the same time, so it's easy to get them out of sync. And then another point is that all kinds of dependencies are tried to get to minimum, so that for example, if there is some really fashionable new thing coming, as we know in the front-end world, this is happening every week, but then we don't necessarily want to build everything based on this, because we need to take into account that somebody must maintain this system for quite many years to come. And for example, the component library doesn't include a routing or a router at all, but it's injected, and so you can use it with Next.js, for example. Yeah, so in short, the whole idea is that trying to kind of build it, prepare for change and prepare for extending it. So there will be more technologies, and then in the near future we have a situation where we need to be able to maintain totally different implementations, but hopefully they would be somehow based on each other, or there would be maximum level of automation for this porting taking place. Yeah, so here's a graph that hopefully clarifies this thinking a little bit. So first of all, we have this like the kind of heart or the core of the design system. We have the Figma library, which is like a non-technical implementation of the components, you could say. So that's where you have like the images of all the drawings, and that's like the single source of truth for how something should look like. Then we have the design tokens. They are available as a separate NPM package, so you can take only the tokens if you don't want the full components. Then we have the React library. So basically the React library includes the design tokens already, but you also can take it without the React library if that's better suitable for your needs. Okay, so that's kind of the base set. And if you build a site using this, then for example is brand.aalto.fi, which is our example site, because that's where we host the design system documentation itself. So then you typically want to include the library of your choice, and you also need to have a CMS. So the CMS is not part of the design system, that's a separate thing. And that's a deliberate choice that there can be quite different kinds of CMSs, and are actually at the university they are using like tens of different content management systems, and including this in the design system itself would be a suicide. So that's a separate thing. But anyways, you import this stuff, and then obviously you could build some other site using the same tech stack but different CMS. So there's nothing stopping you from doing this. And let's say then that we would now need to make a new library, like for example this Angular implementation of the system. So then you can take the design tokens, as I said, and also, well, this may be a bit confusing naming, but the React library also produces these styles because they must be defined somewhere. So you can get the CSS styles. If you make the same HTML structure, you can use those out of the box. So then you get the library that you might use in one project, but if it's a well-made general purpose library, then we can include it in the design system itself and other teams can use it later. And then again, you would then need to have some CMS and some way of hosting your end channel, but anyways, that's the same thing with different technology. And then another example would be that you can have this library implemented in a technology which does not rely on the CSS styling, so then you would only take the design tokens. For example, a mobile app, which would be built on, I don't know, like just making a native iOS app. Okay, so that's it. Quite straightforward actually, if you ever have been using any software libraries, but maybe the main point here is that when the design tokens are separated from the React library, then you can build multiple libraries and still keep the kind of hierarchy there in place.
تخليق. Accessible. Funktionaalinen.
Menyesuaikan diri. Kapsayıcı.
Collaborative.
Ympäristöystävällinen.
Okay, so that was the brief introduction to this design system, and I hope that you have some questions or want to discuss some stuff, and we are happy to help you.
Can you repeat the questions?
Yeah,
So
what
when we
happened
get
to this
Yeah.
presentation? Well, luckily it was over
Yeah.
already.
Just-
Take the cable out. Yo, mic drop. Okay, we have some questions. Maybe you were first.
Yeah, so I was looking through the design system page and also comparing to the brand guidelines, and I saw that there's a logo generator because of the logo variations with signage. And I was wondering, isn't there like a missing component piece? Because at least on print and signage and physical aspects, you see quite often around the university the separation between the A part of the logo and the sign that comes, and in the components for the digital part, these are only included in the icon variations, like a whole unitary part, and you can recolor or separate them.
A good question. Yes, that is certainly exactly as you described. There should be such a component, but it is not existing at the moment. Could be added in the later stages. That's well, it's a bit of a long story, but this whole logo generator is from a different part of the university, and we don't have power over this world. But yeah, I think there should be this React component which only allows you to define the parameters, and then you get the logo of your liking. Yep.
Yeah, chaos and anarchy. Two-part question, basically. How do you control or prepare for the fact that accessibility requires some expertise? Like, for example, Aria Atomic, you have to decide whether the user is bombarded by every change all the time or not. Usually content producers don't know what to put there and developers don't know what to put there. So how do you handle that? On the other side, the pure anarchy side, if you give free rein to developers or maybe designers as well, you end up in a situation where you get a form in a tooltip and the form contains tooltips. Do you do defensive coding or do you just prepare for the worst? How do you handle that?
No, well, I guess, yeah, well, great power comes great responsibility, or how does it go? But like, we cannot prevent people from really like misusing the system in ways that would be totally inaccessible. On the other hand, we try to make, for example, the components in a way that they would contain the ARIA labels and this kind of stuff. So if you are like only modifying the colors and this kind of stuff, so you don't need to even know about these things. But then again, like, yes, you can, of course, if you don't want to pay any attention to accessibility, you can also break it or create stuff that is not accessible. But at least the system tries to help you with those. Because I think most of the time people don't like intentionally want to make inaccessible stuff, but it happens by mistake, or you didn't pay attention, or you didn't have time, or you didn't know. So yeah, there is not really like defensive coding. I don't know what you mean with this exactly, but like
a more banal example is CSS, cascading styles. Some bugger properties are actually cascaded. For example, box sizing. Well, you create a component that assumes that box sizing is the default value, but then someone uses the component with a different box sizing and it breaks. Do you actually set the box sizing in all of your components?
No, well, no. That's a good example. Like, we could basically do that. That would maybe be a good approach in some cases. Then again, like preparing for all the possible wrappings, I think it's a bit harder. And I guess at the moment it's been more on the level of trying to provide some examples and instructions that this is how you might do it. And then if you manage to break it, then it's your problem.
And I think if you use the tokens, I'm out. Yeah. So if you use the tokens, our last line of defense, basically the things that, for example, for color or for dimensions, the things that you have there to select from, if you can't really select raw, they're going to be accessible at all times, basically. But then when you go like AWOL, then anything can happen, you know?
Yeah, I work in a similar system. I have traumas.
Yeah, and actually the whole accessibility field is something that is like a never-ending battle, or I think even at the moment there is a lot of components which could be improved accessibility-wise, even though there maybe more in this project than in some others, there's been some effort put into this, at least to think about these accessibility things. But over time I hope we get better at that also. Yeah.
Do you automatically export from Figma the tokens to the package, or do you do it manually?
Yeah, well, like we mentioned in the beginning, it's been quite a long journey and we tried all kinds of things. So first we had this approach that we tried to export everything from Figma automatically, made some own plugins that also exported not only the tokens but also the components into HTML and CSS, but that route turned out to be a bit rocky, so we then gave up with this, at least on the component level, then tried a couple of plugins, even tried to write my own for exporting the tokens, but then in the end came up with the solution that yeah, fuck this, and it's better to just do it manually, because partially because I am lazy, but also because I think the benefit of this is actually quite small, because you don't change them that often, and it's not very hard to update them in the code base. Maybe more important has been to just think about like how if the tokens are existing in different formats, so how can you from one format generate the others.
And the client had an idea that this could happen from the Figma side, and I don't even trust myself that much. So
it's like it's often been the case that we think that okay, could we export like colors and things that if we want to have more dynamic change, but it's risky because then you don't know what everything is affected.
Someone's trying things in the wrong place.
Yeah, and actually something we didn't talk about too much in the presentation is that there is like multiple levels of version control in place also. So for example, if you change something in Figma, it doesn't mean that automatically all the pages in the whole university change, but then because that would be quite dangerous, as you can imagine. So basically the best thing that a designer could do with this automation would be to create a pull request to the tokens repository. That would most probably not make the designer happy, so that's like the very small step then to do the manual update. So basically you need to then, in order for this change to make any effect on any end product, it needs to propagate all the way through from the tokens to the component library and then to the end product. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I have a kind of like a chain question to that one. So how do you like make sure the visual regression part? Let's just say that some developer changed something or like something along the way. Let's just say in your automation something actually altered the thing. So like how do you actually make sure that the visual regression doesn't really happen in the design system?
Like from the, you mean like if the developer changes something that they...
Even in the design maybe like unintentional.
No, well there need to be then of course some quite close collaboration between the people who use the Figma and who make the components, but then we don't have any automatic like test for these kind of things. I think it's mostly just based on like, well, if you develop something, show it to the designer and the other way around. And well, yeah, so far it's been quite easy because it's mostly the two of us who are doing this stuff, but I guess in the future if we would have a bigger team, this must be paid more attention to. Now I know there are some tools like, for example, the if you are using Storybook with this web publishing system where you can have the visual checks, but we haven't used that because there are some limitations to where we can actually publish this stuff. It must be on the university servers and so forth.
We actually tried an AI thing created in Aalto University that sort of went through Figma designs and tried to give nods to the right direction, but I think it was maybe because the sort of the point of that was that it looks at the design and points out what's wrong. And what we would like to do maybe is to look at the thing that's been drawn and then suggest something that exists. But that's also sort of a full control thing, so then it misses the anarchy, and we want the anarchy.
Yeah, and then maybe the biggest source of this mismatch between the Figma design file and the implemented components comes from the situations where, for example, the Figma design doesn't include enough examples of some edge cases, like what happens if this text is so long and it doesn't fit here, does it go in 2 lines or not, and then the development stage must make this kind of decisions and they might not be updated back to Figma. But then again, like I think my opinion is that it doesn't make sense to design everything in Figma because it's not the best tool for these responsive challenges, for example. Yep.
Very nice slides. What software did you use to do those slides?
Keynote.
Nice.
Thank you.
An extremely generic question that pops up all the time in our end. Who owns white space?
Who owns
if
white
you have a
space?
button, does it define its own white space, or is it the bottom's parent, or is it the what did you call the level below templates?
Sections.
Is it the section that owns the white space, or who? We run into this all the time, that we can't define the white space at any level because it's always the wrong place for it. Someone else has to tweak it a bit at some point.
Yeah, that's a good question. And do you want to talk about this?
You can talk about
Yeah,
it.
it's one of my favorite topics. But anyways, how we approach this whole stretching and layout problematics is that in this design system, the components are basically stretching to whatever size they have, so they don't have any paddings, or they just fill the container where they are placed in. And the same is actually true for the modules also. So they need to take care of their internal layout stretching, but not to worry about the viewport size or anything like this. And then the sections are there actually, like, main purpose is to deal with the responsiveness and to contain the paddings to each other, and there is a layout grid that is present in all the sections, like you have columns and paddings and gutters and this. So then they are built in a way that you can put any combination of sections one after the other, and they should always look pretty okay. Then there is also a system which, well, like that, if you have two yellow sections after each other, there is need for a bit less spacing or less padding there between those two, rather than if you have a yellow and a black one, because for visual reasons. So that's also automatically taken care of. There are some design tokens, like semantic dimension tokens, that are used to make these spacings more generic. So I don't know, does that answer your question?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. So, like, I think most of the responsive design challenges can actually be solved with this kind of simple formula that you keep the smaller things, not know anything about the viewport, and the bigger things do not care what is inside of them. So basically the sections only provide like these slots where you could put whatever module, and then the module must be able to accommodate any size that is given. Well, I know there are other approaches, but in this case at least it's been working pretty okay.
Do you think that container queries will be useful?
Yes, and actually I didn't use them in the beginning because it was considered like unstable, or that I wasn't sure if we had some requirements for supporting old browsers and stuff. But then at some point we decided to start using them, and then they are now in use in some cases. They could be, that's actually one of our items on our to-do list, to take them more systematically in use. There are some cases, like for example a card that could be in a container where you have 3 cards next to each other. Then you have some other layout where you have only one card, but it's in the side in a kind of a narrow container. Well, kind of like a classic example of where the container queries could work, and I hope that during this year we will have them in more extensive use. Yep.
So Aalto is a university school of researchers. There are a few research templates, basically in LaTeX, for presentations that are following quite similar guidelines to the branding. Were you responsible of that? Were you influencing that? Did anybody ask anything, or they just got the assets and included it?
I hope it's a gift from heavens that they used something that we've made, but no one has asked us anything.
Okay, so I guess somebody just followed the example.
Yeah, it's like because okay, at the moment the situation is that we made this system. It's kind of like mature now, or it has enough stuff for starting to build something, but not so many people in the university are using it, and actually we don't know who is using it. But I know there have been a couple of cases where for example, some teams have it like redesigned or like revamped the visuals based on this style, but they might not have used any of the components, like technically speaking. So this might actually be the way in many places, because some of the publishing systems and platforms there might be very hard to like that you cannot just take React components and put them in, but it's a custom system. So it might well be that they've been looking at these and then use them. At least, for example, somebody was making the email templates, I think, based on these colors, or at least changing them somehow. But it's a bit of a mystery for us. We only care about this design system, and then somebody else uses it. It should not be the case, but that's how it goes. Yes.
There's one slide that you show many pictures at different websites. I believe it's a slide before you put like two sessions, like you two different group of users. Can we see that slide? And my question is, are those pictures like those people using your components?
No, we could see that, but now I don't know why, but we have a black TV here. So,
this one is still working though.
Is it? Whoa, interesting. I can do it from here, I think. Okay, give me a moment. No, fuck it.
Yes. Because you just said that you
This
don't know
one.
who's using it. So I was like a little bit confused. If you don't know who uses it, then what does it?
No. These are not using this. This is like the kind of starting point that there was a lot of different stuff that are.
That's what they have.
Yes, and that's what we thought, that we must get rid of this, but then in the end we don't want to get rid of it, but I don't know how you can make all these random sites to respect the system. It's a bit of a mystery. Yeah.
More silly questions.
Yes.
Seeing as it's a university, are there any like requirements for science-y components, bar charts and stuff like that?
I don't think there are any sciencey component requirements at the moment, because most of the things use an external system that has the things that the researchers really want to show their work, and they're gonna hold on to that
And
for
those
their
are
life.
completely inaccessible.
Yep. But we've been in talks about like certain types of sort of data visualization components, but we're not there yet.
That's a
Because-
hard
Yeah,
thing to tackle.
it's gonna be a war.
Yeah, and like technically speaking, there is quite many different kinds of implementations for this, like more advanced data visualizations, and what we could do basically is to at least provide some kind of like examples of how it might look like without even programming it, but as an image that you could use this kind of colors, and this could be the way to make a bar graph or whatever weird complex Verona you want to make. But anyways, then implementing it has not been seen as a very good idea, because then we would need to start getting more opinionated about technology, and that's not the spirit. Yes. Who wanted to ask something?
I have one final question.
Yeah.
So, well, a bit more silly, I suppose. So, like regarding your sizing and spacing, was it sort of free form, or did you have some kind of guideline, depending on different viewports? Like, how did you come up with the sizing and spacing, like between elements, or let's just say for even container sizes and everything?
Well, the dimension tokens, they have the so the first tier has ORM values, and then they get placed to the next tier where they get more of a semantic naming, and then a next tier which takes care of, let's say, like page or screen margins and the spacing between sections. So these tokens then take into account on which viewport you are, so they're going to change according to it.
And the actual size, basically, let's just say the pixels, like some of the section is 600 by 400. So like, my kind of like idea is that, is it some sort of like guideline that you followed, or is it like, no, actually free form and it looks good, so let's just do it and let's see. I mean, how did the testing go basically for those kind of UI elements?
It's basically a lot of testing on how these things are gonna look like in different viewports.
So basically the feedback loop.
Yep. That's basically it. So there's like, cause you're gonna run into some very esoteric viewports at some point. So you just need to sort of look at them and then try to define what's good for most of the cases that you're gonna run into.
But did you start with 12 columns and 8 pixels?
Tuomas here is a very hardcore proponent of the 8 pixels, so yes, we did.
Yeah, I can maybe show it to you from the Figma if you are interested in this, but this is basically the I cannot speak and use two hands. Yeah, well, anyways, but we have like basically regarding the layouts, there is a 12-column grid system used on most viewports, except on the phone where you only have 2 columns. Then we have the, if you look at the variable system, so we have the base dimensions like this. You have the kind of allowed values, so everything is basically following this 16 pixels like one rem grid, except some exceptional cases where you would have 8 or 4. But that kind of by itself already gives certain structure to the layouts. You don't use like 7 pixels or 13. It's somehow in the grid. Then we have this like semantic layer of things where you have for each breakpoint that we use, you have different values. So for example, this container which contains the 12 columns, it has things called like padding and gutter, and they are different in different breakpoints. So then this way it is possible to design something in Figma and use the same variables as in the code, which actually makes the implementation very nice also when you can just look at the Figma file and see that, okay, this is again this certain variable. So there's some stuff like, for example, the section paddings that are also responsive, and the typography is responsive to different heading sizes are changed by viewport. So this way, then if you look at some section here, what would be an example? No, that's like a simple section which is called CTA. So it only has this like image and text at the bottom. So then you can see that this same typographical style here called H2, something like this when it's on desktop, and when it's on mobile it's slightly smaller. And also the gutters and paddings are changing ways on the viewport. So then it's possible using the variables you can then, I don't know if you are Figma users, am I getting too deep with this stuff, but then you can easily change the whatever frame, you can go there and and use the variables to tweak these values without redesigning, but just choosing the, for example, the viewport size here, and then it changes everything that is dependent on it. Or the same way goes for these colors and stuff. Yeah, but anyways, then in the coding side, then we have this. There was a button. Oh, you didn't. Okay. Well, anyways, there is a tool for the development where we can test these different layouts. So we can choose different kinds of like combinations of these columns that are used all over, and then see how it behaves when you are different sizes. So you can see how, for example, that these blocks go on top of each other. It's a mobile, but still next to each other, and these follows the same grid. So you can see the columns are used in this level also. So yeah, that's the idea, that you kind of try to think about the implementation in the Figma already quite a lot. So it's easier to develop, and you don't need to make these kind of decisions about, for example, what are the variables called or how to implement this thing, but it's already solved in Figma.
How much of the technicalities of this that is have been decided by you and in comparison to getting feedback straight from some stakeholder? That could be somebody who directed the project on Aalto side or somebody you had
Sorry, I missed the beginning. Like
so
feedback
how
of
much
what?
Like example might be easier. Scientists, engineers, researchers might want higher information density of a single view. Did you have to, or did you have iterative cycles in which you encountered these kinds of opinions or gave feedback on
Yeah.
initial options?
Yeah, Joona might be better to answer this, but there, like the beginning of the project, there was this quite extensive period of like gathering the user needs and like understanding what are they actually doing with this system.
There are the needs for like a higher density of information, but that need is probably not met at the moment. But then again, like, because the actual UI, most of the UI visual design done in this has been done by, not by us, but by Hassan and partners on a very, very sort of beginning phase of the project, as the brand team was very, very keen on participating on that side. And so it has influenced a lot of how it looks. So everything basically we've done after that initial visual design is based on it. It might change at some point. I'm not a huge fan of everything that's in there, but it's only that at the moment. And I think it will need a sort of a possibility to make something that's denser or then like more airy.
So directly for your team, the feedback that you received directly came from the branding?
Yep, mainly the branding at this point.
Or many directions.
Not strictly probably related to your work, but seeing as there were like 50 previous libraries used for
Yep.
components and whatnot, is there some kind of a plan in place so that they could in the next 10 years, maybe, being positive, move into using your design system?
That is the plan, yes. And it's like with varying success, we've been able to sort of move into talks with these people that maybe the thing where you need to, like, for example, reserve all the equipment in an AV lab should not look like this, but maybe like this. But it's sort of, because there are people that have been building these things for work for like 10 years, and they like it for that purpose. It's their corner of the internet. Then it's a hard talk to actually, like, yeah, we want to make this. We wanna change this thing that we've created. And if I, as a consultant, go to them and say that we're gonna do this, then they're not gonna be happy about it. So
yeah, and
it's
in
gonna
large
be
scale, changing stuff requires resources.
Yep.
So there will be resistance for sure.
There's an incredible amount of resistance.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyways, like, I guess that's like accepted, or it is. No one ever thought that everybody would like immediately start using the design system, but it's like a gradual process that takes years or like quite a long time before it would be used somewhere, even like in the majority of the channels. But then I guess nowadays mostly we are now trying to focus on creation of the new websites, for example, that they could benefit from this, and then changing some ages old like massive sites might be never happening because it might not make any sense budget-wise.
That could be lowering inputs as is the booking.
Yes.
Paid booking app, which is completely different, like strikingly different from everything else.
Yeah, exactly, and then like some low-hanging fruits can also be that even in some clumsy legacy system that is not easy to change, you can maybe change the colors and typography, or somehow make it look a little bit same as the others, even though it's not completely following the design system guidelines. Yeah.
During the presentation, I'm not sure if you mentioned something what you are working on, but can you, if it's okay, can you tell us what would be the future aspect and how will this platform look like idea-wise, like what's the next?
Like what's happening next?
Yes.
Well, a lot of things, but I think now the main focus at the moment is that we try to participate. We are like external to Aalto anyways, because we are just for consultants. But anyways, we try to participate in the work of promoting this design system to the people within the university and making instructions and guidelines and this kind of stuff, because it's actually quite a lot of work. Even if you have a shiny, great design system, then nobody's using it if they don't know about its existence and how to get started and so forth. So that's one kind of main area, and also not only to kind of make the visibility, but to check our own instructions. For example, when you start having more users, you realize that something has been explained really badly, or we need to change something, and even the designs themselves can be all wrong, or that there is some components missing and this kind of stuff. So, like in general, getting more use for the system is the first thing. And we of course have some plans of making some new components, for example, but that's something that at the moment is not so much in the focus, because we first need to get the verification for the existing ones to work.
And regarding sort of new elements for the design system, there has been talks about needs of more like, how would I say, more visual or more active things. And then UX-wise, what we sort of try to push is we want to maybe limit the content so that if you have a hero section, you can't like upload a book in there and it's gonna have like millions of lines of text. This is something that we can't do at the moment, but we would like to sort of control the content in a way that the UX is good. And then we also would like to do something about the images, because like there's a lot of content creators. People wanna upload a high def image that is shit, and we would like to do something that actually, like, let's say a thing that the images go through, so that they're maybe a bit more light and maybe a bit more like in tone with each other, so that it would be a more unified experience. Those are maybe the things.
Yeah, and then also when the teams within the university start using it, there might be some needs related to the technology, that somebody wants to start making a port or start making a new implementation of the library in some different language or different front-end framework. And that's probably going to be also some considerable share of our time to help in these projects, even though we might not be taking the full responsibility of it. That was the end of the questions. Great. Okay. Thanks for listening, and then if you want to ask more questions, feel free. We still have some time to hang around here.